Hey everyone, welcome to the Tom's Hardware Podcast for August 2nd, 2022. It's wonderful to be back, and as always, I'm Editor-in-Chief Avram Pilch, joined by Associate Editor Les Pounder, Raspberry Pi expert Ashell, and two very special guests whom we've had on here a couple times before, who are big stars in the industry and are here with really exciting news. John and Paul, the founders of Pimoroni. So wonderful to see you guys. And I know you've got some really exciting things to talk about, because it seems like almost every other day, Pimoroni comes out with some really exciting new toys. Les is often bringing them to the show, but now you guys are here in person. What's new and exciting in your world?
I think mainly for me is if I'm on here 2 more times, I get a free coffee. We
I'll
can make
send
that happen.
I'll make
I've got
that
my
happen.
loyalty card. So it's all Pico W at the moment. That's our entire focus pretty much at the moment. It's been a hectic launch, a lot of new software, short notice, and it's been a wild ride. And we're still not quite at the end of that. Yeah.
Hectic? In what ways has it been hectic?
I think it was relatively short notice, which it usually is with Raspberry Pi launches. And it's a lot of new software and wireless stuff. Doing Wi-Fi and Bluetooth stuff is never easy. There's so many niches to cover off compared to just microcontroller stuff.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, to be honest, their software for the wireless, it's really good, but it was extremely bleeding edge when we first got hold of it. Like everything was very flaky. It was quite hard to work with. Not their fault. It's just complicated stuff. And
Yep.
it's really settled down nicely now after the first couple of weeks of launch.
Yeah.
Speaking of wireless, what do you think the chances are of being able to get it to use the Bluetooth functionality?
I think it's pretty good. As I understand it, the wireless chip, the Cypress or Infineon chip, is basically a couple of ARM cores inside that do a lot of clever DSP stuff to process. There's one chip for the Wi-Fi, one for the Bluetooth. You can actually reprogram their firmware from the Pico. So as I understand it, they're working on a new version of the firmware for the Wi-Fi/Bluetooth chip that will allow the Bluetooth functionality to be exposed over the SPI interface that they're talking to it with. So this chip is quite complicated. It has like 100 pins, and normally the Bluetooth is exposed over a load of those. So they're having to basically shim it with some sort of SPI implementation, but then that has to be implemented for the chip itself, uploaded to the chip. So you'll have to do some sort of firmware update to get that functionality at least. But it seems likely that it will come at some point.
Yep.
Very cool, because I know we really love the Wi-Fi on it, but it would also be awesome if you could do things with it, like use it as a Bluetooth peripheral.
So, well, we'd love that for like Kibo.
Yeah,
it doesn't
exactly.
really make sense to upgrade that to Wi-Fi, but if we've got Bluetooth, suddenly it makes loads of sense.
Definitely.
That would be cool.
Yeah, exactly. So what are some of the new products you guys are working on?
I'm glad you asked that, Avram. No, we worked on a load of stuff. I think Paul intimated that we didn't have much warning for this launch. I think we had a handful of weeks before it came out. So we had to scramble pretty hard to come up with some products that would go with that launch. And I think we did all right. We didn't have enough time, really, so it probably didn't have the impact that we had with the original Pico. But yeah, we're pretty pleased with what came out. There's kind of a nice range of things for experimentation, and also just stuff that's attractive you might want to put on your shelf, like these Galactics behind me.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think we had a few products that were going to use ESP32 of various stripes. We were quite far along with them. And then, like Eben says, hey, we got wireless coming. And we just kind of looked at our desks and kind of swept it all off. And, pivoted really hard because the Pico has just been so freaking good that why would we kind of do anything else, really?
Yeah, and Paul's absolutely right. We'd actually already, like, as a company, the Pi shortage is really hard for us. So we'd already been looking at taking some of our existing products and maybe reworking them for platforms like ESP32 where we needed the Wi-Fi. But yeah, the Pico W arriving was really a relief, because while ESP32 is, you can use it, thousands of people do, it's just not as pleasant as working with the Pico SDK and the kind of the quality of the documentation and code that comes out of the Raspberry Pi Foundation. So yeah, as Paul says, we had like drawings on whiteboards with ESP32 written on there and stuff, and then it was just like wipe them all off, let's start again. But it did mean we had a few things kind of in the works that we could jump on and kind of start iterating immediately with the Pico W.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So you had all your boards in a way designed for ESP32, so you had to sort of pivot them to a Pico W. That's going to take a bit of work, isn't it? Really, even you got forewarning.
Yeah, it was only, it's not a huge number of products, but I think we had 2 or 3. It was mainly the kits that we used to sell that needed a Pi, so things like Pirate Radio and Scrollbot and what have you. A, they were getting a little long in the tooth, and B, we couldn't get the Pis, so we couldn't sell the kits. So we were thinking, well, how do we reimagine these, redesign them, kind of refresh them? But they all relied on wireless functionality, so we were led down the path of putting ESP32 on. They'd have still had the RP2040 because we'd have much rather developed core software for RP2040 and just used ESP for the Wi-Fi. So really, it wasn't a massive deal when Pi turned up and said, hey, there's Pico W now, because it was only that kind of the Wi-Fi aspect that was changing for us, and for the better, right?
Yeah,
definitely.
I think Galactic Unicorn, which is the wall of screens behind John, that was a new thing. Just because
It was a new thing.
we wanted something fairly ostentatious that lent on the power of the Pico and the PIOs.
Yeah, the nice thing about Galactic Unicorn is, well, I think we've always done a Unicorn product kind of for every Pi launch. And this one's by far the most exciting because it's the biggest, it's the brightest. As Ash said, it's the spiciest. It's it's got the nicest pixels we've ever found. Kind of slightly squared apertures. They're big, they're diffused, they look really gorgeous. The PIO means we can drive it at 14-bit color depth at 200 frames a second. So it doesn't strobe and do weird stuff when you film it on camera. So it's like rock solid. Normally you get all sorts of weird flickering effects.
Well, that
in
does
fact, it's not 200 frames a second. Sorry, it's almost 400 frames a second. It's running.
Oh.
So it kind of it just way overscans any sort of camera's update rates, so you don't get those weird artifacts, which makes it great for the background of a video. Like we could definitely see people like streamers using this because we're going to have a load of demos for them to use at the start. So you can have things like your subscriber counts on there or tweets coming through, scrolling across, whatever. It's just a really flexible display that's quite glitzy and sits nice in the background with a lovely bit of depth of field.
Yeah. I was going to mention that the code.
Its shape is kind of in the shape of a marquee for a Picade, but if that Picade was really large.
Yes.
Which obviously we can't confirm or deny that there is a really large Picade coming.
Yes.
How large would it be, perhaps?
So
Can't
about that size, I'd say. Give or take.
About that size. Yeah.
That's
a lot of space just for one person.
Oh, you could program it to change depending on the title that you just launched. There's so many options for that. That's so cool. Yeah. Someone made a comment, I think that's pretty funny. Dave Gallup, he says, that's one heck of a badge for a lanyard.
Well, it has
got a lanyard slot.
So it will actually ship with a lanyard so that you can wear it as a badge if you want to.
That's fantastic.
Flavor Flav style.
Yeah. The other thing is it has little metal feet, which I don't have attached to this one. So it stands up on its own. You can do it vertically or horizontally. Like
that's really nice.
In the future, there will very likely be a milled wooden box for it as well. And then a clear layer over the top of that. So it looks a bit like a kind of 60s alarm clock, but kind of a stretch limo version, which won't be cheap, but will be lots of fun because we just fancy doing something a bit silly.
I mean, it'll still be cheaper than every other kind of YouTube counter display that I've seen out there, I'm pretty sure.
Probably.
Because they're like $300 plus.
Yeah, I've seen a few of those. I've often wondered about the code for them to get them to work, because sometimes it's just so convoluted it's not worth the effort. So I'm happy to see that the code for your products is nicely abstracted. It's quite easy to work with.
Yeah, the Galactic, because we're getting Enviro out the door at the moment, but our next focus is Galactic, and we're already talking about how that software is going to work. And we have the idea that we'll create kind of a set of predefined scenes. So that might be different types of effects or ways that text is overlaid or animated. And those scenes will be very customizable. So they have all sorts of parameters that you can apply to change them to what you want them to look like. And then that you would be able to hook those scenes up to a provider like If This Then That, for example, to actually stream the data in that would then be displayed on that theme. So it could be something like show your YouTube subscriber account. If an event comes in that's a new subscriber subscribes, some sort of explosion effect, and then back to the subscriber account, if you see what I mean. The idea being you can do all that codeless.
Yeah.
But if you want to, you can go in and get your hands dirty. Obviously, with all our products, you can always go in and code it yourself if you want to.
What are the power demands like for it? Because I imagine with the Pico being the main driver, it doesn't take too much. But with the new LEDs and the fact that it's got a badge hook.
So this is I can run this guy off this little battery for about 2 hours. I mean, because it's a scanning display. Actually, at any given time, only one row is ever lit, and they're constantly being scanned. So actually, you're only talking about 53 RGB LEDs at a time, and LEDs are just really bright. They don't, they take surprisingly little power. You can get this to consume a fair bit by turning the brightness right up, but I can't get it the right way up. I can't work out which way I'm looking. So it's pretty bright if you turn it up to max.
So is Les going to have to create a case, 3D print a case for this for people who want to wear it around their neck?
Probably.
Yep.
Yeah.
And kind of put an expenses claim in for a new 3D printer then, please.
You might want one on the back as well, a bit sandwich board.
Right. Yeah.
A message as you arrive and something as you leave, that kind of thing.
John McCabe says, any idea when the Galactic Unicorn will be released?
It's going to be around 2 weeks. So we want to get the software right. But yeah, roughly 2 weeks.
And,
no, I'm going to say 3 weeks. We're definitely not going to make 2 weeks.
And still about £75.
It's certainly it's going to be about that. I think we made some changes. So one of the reasons that this didn't come out on the launch day is that the column driver chips that we're using, the artworks are fab on this as well. Paul did a really nice job.
Beautiful.
That is nice.
These column driver chips, we were using a different part, and just with the supply chain stuff, it turned out we were only going to be able to get about 7,000 or 8,000 of those ever until 2024 or something ridiculous. So we swapped that part, and in doing so, we also decided to swap the LED package. We found something a lot nicer, really kind of nice chunky pixels, which delayed it, but I think it was definitely worth the delay. It's going to be a much better product for those changes. So yeah, it's all good.
Yeah. So a question from the audience, from Hopcappy. Can you connect unicorns together and run stuff across 2 or more of them?
Well, question. I don't know if you knew this, but actually it's got wireless on the back, so you can synchronize them that way if you want to. Or they also have dual Quest connectors. So if you didn't want to use the I2C, you can actually daisy chain as many units as you want using the Quest connectors, and then send like a synchronization signal down there. Or have, if you wanted to do like 5 displays, you could set up 4 of them as I2C devices and 1 as an I2C host, and it could actually send instructions to the devices to tell them what to display next. So loads of options for doing that.
Very cool. So you've got other products as well. So before the show, John, you were showing me something that you've been playing with, the Enviro Indoor, if I remember rightly.
We have a whole range of these Enviro products. So these are wireless little battery controlled sensors that you put around your house. So the idea with these is that you basically always run them on battery. You plug them in once to provision them at the start, and then after that you go and park this one in your bedroom or your kitchen, wherever you want it, and it just reports data back on a schedule. So that, generally speaking, they'll sit there in sleep mode, conserving power, for 5 minutes. Then they'll wake up, they'll take a set of sensor readings, log them to their local storage, shut back down again, go back to sleep. And then maybe hourly, they'll connect to Wi-Fi and they'll upload that data to somewhere like Adafruit.io or to an MQTT broker or to your own custom HTTP endpoint, whatever you prefer, and then again go back to sleep. So the whole idea is that these guys are meant to run for months. You just forget about them. You install them with the battery, leave it for a few months, and the data gets fed into your dashboard. I think I shared the link with you, Les. I don't know if you can show it on screen, but I've got some sample units here that are kind of logging temperature data.
Bear with, and I will bring it up.
They're very cool. Where have we got it? I can't see it. Am I looking at the wrong screen? Maybe.
Yeah.
So each of the boards has got an onboard RTC. So that basically performs two tasks. One is that it maintains the clock, which if we go to sleep properly, we need something else to maintain the clock. And in that mode, it's only drawing about 5 microamps. So it'll run effectively forever on a couple of AA batteries. And the other thing the RTC does is wakes us back up again. So we tell the RTC to wake us up in 5 minutes time, and then we actually cut power completely to the Pico and everything else on the board. It has no supply anymore. And that means the board can sit there at that kind of 5 microamp level. And then 5 minutes later, it's automatically woken up and it can immediately do its work. A second ago, the light blinked, and that was it taking a reading. I've got this one set up to do it once a minute because it's kind of in testing mode. But really, that reading takes half a second, maybe 300 milliseconds, and then the whole board's back to sleep again. So it's very power efficient, and every 5th or 20th reading, it will stop and upload those via Wi-Fi.
How often do you have to change the battery out?
It depends, Ash. So it depends which board you've got. For the indoor, probably 3 to 6 months if it was a couple of AA batteries. So maybe twice or 3 times a year, something like that. Okay. We also have a particulate sensor for doing kind of like PM 2.5, PM10 particle measurement. This one's a bit more power hungry, so you can either attach a bigger battery or you might need to change it once a month. It really depends on what setup works for you, or you can leave them permanently powered. If you just want to put a USB supply into it, you can just leave it powered up forever. And we have a version for grow for monitoring plants. We have the indoor one for kind of indoor environmental sensing like light and temperature, pressure, etc. We have the particulate one for kind of pollution and air quality, and we also have a weather sensor one that hooks up to those kind of weather stations with the anemometers and the wind sensors and the rain sensors and that kind of thing.
Very cool. I can also not say anemometer very quickly.
So I think this is something we've kind of always wanted to do. And actually, if anything, the Pi held us back because it's not suitable for battery-powered operation. It's too power hungry. So we've always had things like the Enviro Plus, etc., which are great products, but they don't lend themselves to being battery-powered or running for long periods of time off-grid, whereas these do. So these are great in that you can just throw them anywhere. If they can't connect to Wi-Fi for some reason, they'll just keep logging locally. When they finally get that Wi-Fi connection, they'll squirt all the data up and then clear their caches and carry on. It just gives you a load of flexibility, and it's dead straightforward to work with.
Yep, very cool. So Andy's got a question. Can you measure the battery level in software?
On these, I believe you can, but only by virtue of the fact that the Pico lets you measure VSys, which is effectively where the battery goes in. What we don't have is any sort of provision to warn you when the battery gets low, because we don't know what chemistry of battery you've attached and what its kind of discharge profile or anything is. So it would be kind of on you to figure out what you felt was a low threshold for your battery and produce a warning that's appropriate and upload it wherever you want it to go. But you can do that. The code's open, right? You just open the editor and you can make those choices and change it to do what you want it to do.
Very cool.
Yeah, I think starting with the Badger, we made a lot of devices that are kind of pretty agnostic about what batteries they take, because in classrooms or whatever, people will have their own kind of thing that they want to use for their own reasons. And rather than trying to make a universal or specific LiPo charger circuit that will cut somebody off, we've just said, okay, here's a connector, here's a load of different battery packs that work with it, and you choose what you want to do. It means you do have to sort out some of the battery reading on the back end. But yeah, it's the best thing for people to, putz around with it.
Yeah, we don't want to force you to use just LiPos because we chose to put a LiPo charge circuit on there. Effectively, it's for kids, and like Paul says, in the classroom, you want to be using a much, should we say, safer battery technology. We've done our best with LiPos. We have these hard-shelled plastic box LiPos now, which are a lot better. They're not going to be punctured easily, but they're still, should we say, exciting technology. And you don't really want to be messing with that.
Too spicy to lick.
Too spicy to lick. But like Paul says, on a lot of products we've done that now, but one of the reasons that we produced the Lipo Amigo Pro is that this allows you to place the charger in line with the product. So here I can plug the device side of this into my Enviro and put the battery into the other side, and now I've got a chargeable battery solution for Enviro. I have to add the other board in line to add that functionality, but that works well.
Yep. Can you show the onboarding, John? Because this is like taking up so much of your time, and it's so sweet.
I can. Just do this one. So if I just reboot this guy, if you hold, there's a button on the front. If you hold it down and hit reset, it will come up in provisioning mode. So it starts off with a kind of a slow pulse of the LED, but it'll go pretty frantic in a minute to tell me it's ready to provision. There we go. So that's now in provisioning mode. It's completely wireless. It's just the battery dangling around. And then, because I'm using my laptop to test it at the moment, it'll pop up as a Wi-Fi network on your device and go straight into kind of a provisioning functionality. So this takes you through the process of telling your Enviro what your Wi-Fi network's called, how often you want to log data, what nickname you want to give it, etc. So for people who are just starting or just don't really want to customize it, all you have to do is go through these steps, and that will basically set up the whole process, from start to finish. But for people who want to get their hands dirty, they can edit the code directly, make changes to the way that the system works. Try and do this. Don't think it wants to read my Wi-Fi networks. Oh, there we go. So yeah, it's just like pretty much what you'd expect. Select your Wi-Fi network and how often you want to log your data.
Yep, and that's all served from the Pico W.
Yes, this is all coming actually off that device. And as soon as you've gone through this process, it'll just tell you, great, you've set everything up. So here I can choose, I want to upload to Adafruit.io, for example. Here's a password, what have you.
I appreciate the user-friendly interface, because that definitely helps people get off the ground with these who, like you said, may not want to get their hands dirty.
Yeah,
I think that's it. You want to be able to get going with it easily, and then hopefully, well, if then you find it isn't doing quite what you want it to do, that's when you can start thinking about going in and customizing it.
That's where the learning begins.
Yeah, we did this with the Badger, and it was absolutely the best idea ever. People loved it. They like a nice, easy intro, just something to poke at, play with, and then get curious about. And the Enviros, they deserve to be installed all over the place. So having something that wanders more towards consumer friendliness and hacker friendliness is, it's what we should be doing.
Definitely. It takes a lot more effort, though, for sure, on the software.
I say God, yes, but you're the one there at 2 a.m. coding this job.
Would you be able to use one of these Enviros for detecting 3D printer fumes, like how bad the air quality is with your resin printer or something like that?
The indoor actually has volatile organic compound detection, so that would be ideal. And also you've got the particulate, so that's got a VOC sensor on it, the BME 688. And also I think the particulate sensor would be appropriate for that as well. I'm pretty sure you'll get kind of PM1, PM2.5 type particulates from 3D printing. Though I don't know a great deal about 3D printing, so ask an expert.
Cool. Well, that could be a great use. Speaking of, we have a question from Hop Cappy. Have you ever considered making a little NIM battery box buck booster chargers thing that could make using them as easy as using a LiPo?
It's kind of interesting. No, but maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, I think practically we've seen so few problems with LiPos these days, especially the hard case one. They're the go-to.
I mean, for something like Enviro or Badger, I don't really see a problem with choosing, say, alkaline or NIMH, because it will last for so long that, if they're rechargeable as well, you spend a couple of hours recharging them and then it runs for days and days and days and days. That's no great hardship. If it was something like Galactic, I don't think I'd recommend running it on tiny little alkaline batteries for very long, because it would just be irritating. You'd be replacing them every 6 hours or something like that. But then Galactic really is designed to be a product that's plugged in. It was more of a joke than anything that we put a battery connector and a lanyard hook on it. So, while they work, we're not saying it's a practical deployment of the technology.
And a speaker.
Oh, yeah, it has audio as well. I forgot to mention that. So it can do little audio alerts and things. The idea being that obviously if it's in the background, you don't really know what it's saying. So if something actually happens, it can kind of bing bong.
Is it like a buzzer or an actual speaker?
It's an actual bona fide speaker.
Wow.
Yep.
Real
Nice.
and digital audio. And in the cased version, which will come at some point, the speaker will be upgraded quite substantially, so it can become a much more viable kind of clock radio type setup. But on the board only, it'll be quite a basic speaker.
I have a question. I want to circle back a little bit because at the beginning we mentioned how we're hoping that Bluetooth support will be something that can be implemented, and I know that you guys mentioned you would be interested in using it for something like the Keybow. But are there any other ideas that you have that maybe don't exist yet, or maybe other products that do exist that you would want to have Bluetooth support for that you've got on the mind for that?
I know Chris wants it for robotics because using something like an Xbox controller is just perfect. I don't know what do kids use these days. Is it PS3 controllers or something? I don't know. I don't do robotics, but that's what they always go to first. So yeah, Bluetooth would be great for things like Inventor 2040.
Nice.
Cool.
Yep, and there's all kind of beacons, positioning, that kind of stuff that you can do with it. So yeah, it'd be nice when it comes.
Ah, the beacons. I remember them from years ago from the Pi. Yeah, Bluetooth beacons.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
And Andy's asking about Galactic and whether it'll support CircuitPython. It will. So Galactic Unicorn has a C++ SDK, and it also has a MicroPython kind of driver. Chris at our place is very keen on CircuitPython. He always tries to add support. So while we can't promise it, it's not like our primary platform. He always puts his best effort in to try and get that to happen. It's a little bit complicated because Galactic does lean heavily on the PIOs, and it needs them also for the audio as well as driving the display. So it's a pretty interesting one. But in principle, I don't see there's any reason it couldn't do.
What's next with, I really love your move into wearables with the Badger and the Tufty 2040.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see yourselves taking it any further into other types of wearables or other types of badges?
We've certainly talked about wearable products around Pico and Pico W. We just haven't quite pulled the trigger on anything yet. I don't know, you got any thoughts?
Well, what were you thinking of there, Abram? Sounds like you might have something in mind.
Well, I mean, I'm a little curious if you do the badge like a color badger with color e-ink. I know that would probably be cost prohibitive, or one that had wireless built in, so that you could wirelessly update the screen.
Yep, Badger will get a wireless at some point, whether it's by putting the W on there or some other solution. But yeah, not this month, I think.
Cool. This is amazing because like 3 or 4 years ago when I was at CES, I tried to make like a Raspberry Pi wearable billboard that would show like the latest headlines from our website, and the power wire immediately like broke when I tried to put it on. But like now I could wear like a Tufty 2040 just to figure out how I get a wireless signal to it. And I
use the Galactic Unicorn for that, Abram.
That's true. I guess I could wear a Galactic unicorn, and then it could just have a scrolling, like, I just have this vision of if I ever get to go back to CES again, the trade show is wearing around a thing that just shows an RSS feed of all of our headlines wherever we go.
Yep.
Bring a few batteries.
I'm very tempted for us to do a large square Galactic Unicorn at some point. Just because it looks so nice in person that I don't think we've gone big enough yet.
Yeah. Oh, we didn't mention
this doesn't cut it.
Yeah. There you go. There's your color e-ink, Abram. It's got the lanyard slot. And it's kind of huge, guru for size. But again, that's using the 7 kilo one. So it's beautiful, but it takes forever to update. And this one's a Hell's Devo unit, which does space images. Just doing locally, but it can do wireless, and it's running off a AAA battery pack. And it's a huge screen. It takes the desktop feet there, which these are custom feet we've had made for all of these. We saw them on those Perspex photo frames you can get, and Nico and Mina sorted out these screw-in ones for us, and they're just genius for making a circuit board that sits on a desktop. But it's definitely really like impressive. A slow TV thing. where you update it once an hour or something.
Yeah, Inky was a nice challenge for getting images to look good on there. We've spent quite a lot of time working on the algorithms to take like a standard JPEG thrown onto the device and then dither it into that weird palette of 8 different colors and work out how to present it, making it look good. I think you can see from what Paul was showing there, the results are surprisingly acceptable. Like, they're actually really quite good. That's, probably not the best test image in the world.
I didn't know if that was a live example at first.
Yeah. And that uses the same RTC technology that we have on Enviro. So that shuts down completely, into real deep sleep mode most of the time. Mm-hmm. It only wakes either from the RTC or if you press a button, that will wake it up and it can do something.
Yeah. I think, it's weird how hard it is to show a JPEG on microcontrollers. So Phil cracking that using the JPG deck was actually a big step.
We had to put an SD card on Inky purely as a kind of working cache space, so that you can manipulate these larger files like JPEGs and things. So it's almost like an extension of the RAM, just really slow. But the genius is that if the screen takes 30 seconds to update, it doesn't really matter how long you spend processing the image. It's almost irrelevant at that point. So we get away with some things that you couldn't do on, say, like a Pico system, for example, because it wouldn't be fast enough. But if we spend a second processing the image to put on the screen, it's a second well spent if the image looks a lot better. So,
Wow, great. So what other exciting things can we look forward to?
Oh, I don't know. I think we're worn out now. God, I'm trying to think. I can't even think anymore. I'm so tired.
We need to complete the sprint, and then we can clear our heads.
Yeah, there's some other stuff in the pipeline now. So we're doing some mini versions of a few of these products because a lot of people don't need the full Beans version. So, for example, Automation 2040 W, there will be a mini coming. So instead of the 3 relays, you get the single relay. It's just a more compressed version of the board, basically. Galactic, there will almost certainly be a mini version, just for a price point, if nothing else, to get to a more achievable price point. There's another one that we're doing a smaller version of as well, isn't it, Paul? Oh, the Inky frame, the one you just held up. So there's going to be a 4-inch version of that coming, as well as that 5.7-inch. Nice. And most of these are really to create versions that are priced more accessibly. Because the thing is, these aren't cheap technologies. 7-color e-ink is obscenely expensive. It just is. And we've put the biggest screen we can get on there pretty much. So it's an expensive product. But if we make a smaller version, it can be cheaper and more accessible to people. It's a bit of a no-brainer, really, for us to do that.
And easier to wear.
Hey, for you maybe. I don't know. I like rocking it Flavor Flav. What can I say?
Yeah, exactly. You could totally. I was thinking about that. Like maybe you put a clock. Maybe you put a clock on there. Where the clock. That is awesome. So exciting. And of course, everyone knows the place to go for all these things is Pimoroni.com, where you can also sign up for pre-order or sign up for alerts, so you can find out exactly when some of these really awesome products are coming out, and you can get your hands on them. Before we go, Les, I know you had something exciting you wanted to show today.
Indeed, yes. So I've been messing around with the Automation 2040 W and the Enviro Indoor. I'll just show you what they look like there, and there they are. So Automation 2040, it's a big slab of board. Great bit of fun though. So I've got it connected to a PC case fan, and a 9-volt battery is over here, just off camera. And I could have done with this about 2 weeks ago when the UK was baking. So what I've got here is just a simple circuit to be controlled by the Automation 2040. But how do I control it? Well, I'm going to use MQTT. Now, I did a recent tutorial on this about how to send messages of MQTT and receive them. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to publish a message on MQTT that goes to this board, which is subscribed. It's going to look for the message and then trigger the fan to come on. But rather than just go to some boring little website, I'm going to build something of my own. So I went to Node-RED. So Node-RED is an event-driven programming language where you create nodes that are linked together. It's like Scratch on steroids. So you can create these nodes that connect together. So if this event happens, go and do this. So in this case, it's going to go to the Tom's Hardware MQTT input there. It's going to check for temperature data. And it's going to display it as a piece of text on the screen, but also as a chart. Now, right now you're thinking, there's nothing there, Les. All I can see is some debug just here. That's pretty boring. But no, we have a full web interface. There's it's called Node-RED dashboard, which is installed via the palettes. And you can create your own dashboards to control things. In this case, I have got the wrong one on the screen. There we go. That ruins the surprise. But hey-ho. There we have the fan kicking in to keep it nice and cool, and I can turn it off, turn it on. And the fan's kept upright by some bespoke connections, which are 2 M3 long screws. None of that fancy Pimoroni tech. But then I wanted to know, could I get data from the web? So, yes, I did. So I got some MQTT data from, let's go back to that screen there, EnviroWindows. So I've got a BME 688, and I've got the right I2C address now. Cheers, Paul. And we're getting live temperature data displayed in another section of my wonderful menu. So right now it's 30 degrees in my office, and it's kept pretty constant over the last hour or so, maybe. If I put my finger on the sensor, you can see it's going to jump up. It takes about 5 seconds. Got a delay on this. There you go. And this is all being controlled via MQTT, sending messages, publishing and receiving them, subscribing, and Node-RED interpreting them and just working with it. And this is going to be a tutorial very soon, once I get it the right way around.
That is awesome. There's just so much you can do now that you have Pico W to really collect data from around the home, or around your office or other environments, because as John said, the power is so low that we don't need to have to be chained to an outlet, and you can have things getting you data from all over the place. So that's great. That's why I think it's great for wearable, and it's great for Internet of Things. So thank you so much to John and Paul. Thank you so much for coming and joining us again. We're really excited, of course, to see all the wonderful new products, and we will see everybody next week at 7:30 UK time, 2:30 p.m. Eastern. See you next time. Bye, everyone.
Thanks.